Elowen didn't know the hooded stranger in the corner booth had killed 3 men that morning. She didn't know he'd been watching her for 5 nights straight, memorizing her movements, cataloging every wince she tried to hide, and she definitely didn't know that the simple bowl of stew she was about to serve him would set fire to a destiny neither of them could escape. All she knew was that her ribs ached where Orvin's boot had connected that afternoon, and if she didn't finish closing the kitchen before midnight, he'd find another reason to remind her who owned her. The ashen hearth was quiet now. The last of the evening's drunks had stumbled into the cold, leaving behind puddles of spilled ale and the stench of pipe smoke. Elowen worked mechanically, scrubbing pots with hands rubbed raw, her thin dress doing nothing to ward off the chill creeping through the cracks in the walls. 17 years. She'd been trapped here for 17 years, since she was 9 years old, and her dying mother had traded her to settle a debt forced upon them by a cruel landlord. Most nights, Elowen barely remembered what freedom felt like. Tonight, exhaustion had sunk so deep into her bones that she couldn't remember much of anything at all. She was hauling a bucket of dirty water toward the back door when she felt it. That prickle at the nape of her neck. The awareness of being watched. Elowen's head turned slowly toward the corner booth. Her heart stopped. A man sat in the shadows, so motionless he might have been carved from the darkness itself. His hood was pulled low, obscuring most of his face. But she caught the sharp line of a jaw, the glint of eyes reflecting the dying firelight. The door was bolted. She'd checked it herself not 10 minutes ago, which meant he'd been sitting there the entire time, silent as death while she worked. "Kitchen's closed," Elowen said, and she was proud of how steady her voice came out. She'd learned long ago that showing fear only invited worse. "You need to leave." The stranger didn't move. "One meal." His voice was low, rough like gravel wrapped in velvet, the kind of voice that made something deep in her chest tighten unexpectedly. "Whatever you have left, I'll pay double." "I said we're closed." "Triple then." Elowen hesitated. Triple would be more coin than she saw in a week, and Orvin took everything she earned anyway. But still, if she could skim just a little, hide it in the loose floorboard beneath her cot. "Please." The word was quiet, almost soft. It didn't match the danger radiating off him in waves. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Elowen found herself setting down the bucket. "Wait here." She moved to the kitchen on legs that didn't quite feel like her own. Her hands trembled slightly as she ladled the last of the lamb stew into a bowl. The good stew, the one she made for paying customers, not the watered-down slop Orvin served to anyone too drunk to notice. She added a chunk of bread, still warm from the evening's baking, and carried it back to the corner booth. When she set the bowl down, the stranger's hand emerged from beneath his cloak to stop her retreat. His fingers closed around her wrist, not hard, but firm enough that she couldn't pull away. Elowen froze. "Your sleeve," he said quietly. She looked down. Her dress had ridden up, exposing the mottled purple bruising that wrapped around her forearm like a grotesque bracelet. Finger marks, clear as day. Panic clawed at her throat. She yanked her arm back, and this time he let her go. "Kitchen accident," she said quickly. "I'm clumsy." "No, you're not." He lifted his head slightly and she caught a fuller glimpse of his face. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth set in a grim line, and eyes the color of molten amber, burning with an intensity that made her want to flee and stay in equal measure. "I've watched you carry 6 plates at once without spilling a drop. You move like water, Elowen. Graceful, efficient, careful." Her blood ran cold. "How do you know my name?" "I know many things about you." He pulled the bowl closer, inhaling the steam. "I know you've worked at this inn since you were a child. I know the owner treats you like property instead of a person. And I know..." He paused, lifting a spoonful of stew to his lips. "I know what you put into your cooking." He took a bite. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, then wonder, then a sharpening of attention that made Elowen's stomach drop. "Remarkable," he murmured. I'd heard rumors, but I didn't quite believe them until now. She stepped back, heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. I don't know what you're talking about. The stranger's amber eyes lifted to hers, and in them, she saw something that terrified her more than Orvin's fists ever had. Recognition. Yes, he said softly. You do. Elowin's first instinct was to run, bolt for the back door, disappear into the night, find some hole to hide in until this stranger and his knowing eyes moved on to the next town. But running meant leaving behind everything: her mother's locket hidden beneath her cot, the small stash of coins she'd been secretly hoarding for 3 years, the fragile dream of someday buying her freedom. So she stood her ground, even as her legs trembled beneath her. You should finish your stew and go, she said flatly. I don't know what you think you felt, but the pain in my shoulder is gone. His words cut through her denial like a blade. The stranger rolled his shoulder slowly, testing it, and something like wonder crossed his shadowed features. I took an arrow 3 days ago, he continued. The wound was deep. This morning I could barely lift my arm. And now, he flexed his fingers, rotated his wrist. Nothing. Not even a twinge. That's not possible. And yet, he gestured to the half-empty bowl. Your stew tastes like comfort and safety, like the first warm day after a brutal winter. And somewhere between the first bite and the third, the wound in my shoulder simply dissolved. 3 days of pain, gone in 3 bites. His amber eyes pinned her in place. That's not ordinary cooking, Elowin. That's a gift. The word hit her like a slap. Gift. The same word her mother had used in those final moments before she'd handed Elowin over to Orvin. Hide your gift, little one. Never let anyone see. The world isn't kind to people like us. Her mother had been right. Elowin had seen what happened to gifted individuals in Valdris, the ones who couldn't hide, who got caught, who were sold to the highest bidder or burned for witchcraft, depending on which lord held power that season. She'd spent her entire life making sure no one ever looked too closely at her food, at the way wounds closed faster for those who ate it, at the way lies turned to ash in the mouths of those who tried to speak them after consuming her bread. If you're going to report me, she said quietly, just do it. I'm too tired for games. Report you? Something almost like offense flickered across his face. I'm not here to hurt you. Then what do you want? He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its edge, replaced by something rawer, wearier. Someone I care about is dying, poisoned by an enemy I can't yet name. Every healer I've consulted, every apothecary, every so-called miracle worker, they've all failed. The poison is old magic, woven deep, and it's killing her slowly. His hands tightened around the bowl. But your gift, it's not just healing, is it? It's purification, truth, the ability to burn corruption from the body and leave only what's clean. Elowin's breath caught. He understood her gift better than she did herself. Who told you about me? People who trade in secrets. People who owe me favors. He leaned forward, and for the first time, she noticed the exhaustion carved into his features, the dark circles beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way he held himself like a man running on nothing but willpower. I've been searching for someone like you for 8 months, following whispers, chasing dead ends. And then I heard about a cook in a nowhere town whose soup could cure a fever overnight, whose bread made liars choke on their own words. Orvin will never let me leave, she whispered. He owns my debt, my life. The stranger smiled then, and it was not a kind expression. Orvin, he said softly, is about to discover that some debts are not his to collect. Before Elowin could respond, the back door slammed open. Orvin filled the doorway like a storm cloud given flesh, broad-shouldered, thick-necked, with small eyes that glittered with perpetual cruelty. His gaze swept the room, finding Elowin standing too close to the stranger's table, and his face twisted into something ugly. What's this then? He stalked forward, meaty hands already curling into fists. Entertaining customers after hours? Finally figured out another way to earn your keep? Elowyn shrank back instinctively. He was just leaving. Did I ask you to speak? Orvin's hand shot out, catching her by the arm. The same bruised arm, and squeezing until she gasped. We'll discuss your punishment after I throw this vagrant out. He turned toward the stranger, and stopped. The hooded man had risen from the booth, and standing, he was taller than Elowyn had realized, taller than Orvin. His cloak fell back slightly, revealing leather armor etched with symbols she didn't recognize, and at his hip, a sword with a pommel shaped like a snarling wolf. But it was his eyes that made Orvin freeze. Those amber eyes, now burning with cold, lethal fury. Remove your hand from her, the stranger said quietly, or I'll remove it from your wrist. Orvin laughed, a nervous, blustering sound. You think you can threaten me? In my own establishment? I have friends in this town, stranger. Powerful friends. One word from me, and you'll be swinging from the gallows by morning. Your friends? The stranger's voice was almost conversational. Would those be the men who visit every full moon? The ones who take the gifted you've collected and transport them east in locked wagons? He stepped closer, and Orvin stumbled backward, releasing Elowyn's arm. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I wouldn't trace the disappearances back to this miserable little inn and the rat who runs it? Orvin's face went pale. I don't know what you're... 17 people in the last 2 years. Vanished from villages within 50 miles of here. All of them gifted. All of them sold. The stranger's hand rested on his sword hilt. And the one sitting right under your roof, the most powerful I've encountered in a decade, you kept for yourself. Beating her, starving her, thinking no one would ever come looking. Elowyn couldn't breathe. Trafficking. Orvin was part of a trafficking network for gifted people. And she had been too valuable to sell, too useful to let go. Who are you? Orvin's voice cracked. The stranger reached up and pushed back his hood. Elowyn's knees nearly buckled. She'd never seen the Alpha King in person, few common folk had, but everyone knew the stories. The young ruler who'd taken the throne at 22 after his parents' assassination, who'd spent 7 years rooting out corruption with brutal efficiency, who was said to have eyes like molten gold and a wolf's instinct for hunting prey. Theron of Valderis, the Alpha King himself standing in Orvin's filthy taproom. No, Orvin whispered, stumbling backward. No, that's impossible. Elowyn. Theron didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the trembling inn owner like a predator deciding how to kill its prey. Gather your belongings, whatever you can carry. You're leaving with me tonight. Her voice wouldn't work properly. I can't. The debt. He'll send men after me. There is no debt. Theron's voice was iron. There is no contract. There is no claim. Everything Orvin owns is now forfeit to the crown, including whatever false document he's been holding over your head. He finally turned to look at her, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. You're free, Elowyn. Right now, in this moment, you're free. The word hit her like a physical force. Free. She'd dreamed of it for so long that she'd stopped believing it was real. Theron extended his hand toward her, and when her trembling fingers touched his palm, something sparked between them. A jolt of recognition that raced through her blood like wildfire, settling deep in her chest with a resonance that felt ancient, inevitable. His eyes widened slightly. She saw him feel it too. The bond. Well, Theron murmured, his voice rough. That complicates things. They rode through the night. Elowyn had never been on a horse before, let alone one as magnificent as the silver mare Theron had procured for her from the inn's stable. She clung to the saddle with white-knuckled hands, her small bundle of belongings, her mother's locket, her hidden coins, a change of clothes, pressed against her chest. Theron rode beside her, close enough to catch her if she fell. Behind them, Two of his guards flanked Orvin, whose wrists were bound in iron chains. The inn owner had stopped blubbering threats somewhere around the second mile, reduced now to sullen, terrified silence. "Where are you taking me?" Elowen asked when they paused at a stream to water the horses. "Thornhaven, my stronghold." Theron handed her a water skin, and she noticed he'd warmed it somehow, the leather soft against her frozen fingers. "It's half a day's ride. You'll be safe there." Safe. The word felt foreign on her tongue. Dawn was breaking when the fortress came into view. Thornhaven rose from the forest like something out of the old stories, dark stone walls draped in climbing ivy, towers that seemed to pierce the pale morning sky, and a gate carved with wolves that looked almost alive in the shifting light. Inside, the courtyard bustled with quiet efficiency. Servants moved with purpose but not fear. Guards nodded respectfully as Theron passed. Children, actual children, played near a fountain, their laughter ringing clear and bright. Elowen stared. She'd expected coldness, cruelty dressed in finer clothes. Instead, she found warmth. A woman with steel-gray hair and kind eyes approached, bowing slightly to Theron before turning her attention to Elowen. "This is Marin," Theron said. "She runs the household. She'll see you settled, get you fed and bathed. When you're ready, I'll take you to my sister." Sister. So that's who was dying. "Your Majesty." Marin's voice was gentle but firm. "The girl looks half-starved and fully exhausted. Whatever you need from her can wait until she's had proper rest." Elowen braced for fury. Orvin would have struck anyone who spoke to him with such bluntness. But Theron simply nodded. "You're right. I'm sorry." He looked at Elowen, and something in his amber eyes softened. "Take whatever time you need. Marin will bring you to me when you're ready." He turned and strode toward the main keep, his guards hauling Orvin behind him. Elowen watched him go, something strange and fragile unfurling in her chest. Marin touched her elbow gently. "Come, child. Let's get some food in you and wash the road away. You're safe here. Truly." For the first time in 17 years, Elowen let herself believe it. The chamber they gave her was larger than Orvin's entire private quarters. A fire crackled in the hearth. The bed was piled with furs so soft she almost wept when she touched them. And on a small table by the window sat a tray of food: bread, cheese, sliced fruit, and a pot of tea that smelled like honey and chamomile. Elowen ate until her stomach ached, bathed until the water went cold, and slept for the first time in years without fearing what morning would bring. Lysara was dying. Elowen saw it the moment Theron led her into the sick room, the grayish pallor of the young woman's skin, the shallow rise and fall of her chest, the dark veins spreading beneath her flesh like poison roots seeking purchase. "She was fine 3 weeks ago," Theron said quietly, standing at the foot of his sister's bed. His hands were clasped behind his back, but Elowen noticed how tightly his fingers gripped each other. Healthy, laughing, planning her bonding ceremony, and then one morning, she didn't wake. The healers found nothing? They found everything and nothing. The poison is old magic, woven into her blood. It's not killing her quickly. It's savoring her. His voice cracked almost imperceptibly. Every healer says the same thing. They can slow it, but they can't stop it. She has weeks left. Maybe days. Elowen approached the bed slowly. Lysara was young, perhaps 18, with dark hair spread across the pillow like a shadow, and features that echoed Theron's own. Beautiful, even in the grip of death. "May I?" Elowen gestured toward the girl's hand. Theron nodded. The moment Elowen's fingers touched Lysara's skin, she felt it. The wrongness coiled inside her like a living thing. The poison was sentient, malicious, designed not just to kill, but to corrupt. Whoever had crafted it wanted Lysara to suffer. "I can try," Elowen said softly. "But I need to cook for her. My gift works through food. It's the conduit. If I can get her to eat, even a few bites, I might be able to burn the poison out piece by piece." "Whatever you need, the kitchens are yours." Elowen spent the next 3 days in the castle kitchen, experimenting with broths and remedies, infusing each dish with every ounce of healing intention she possessed. The kitchen staff watched her with curiosity at first, then growing respect as they tasted her creations and felt the warmth that radiated through them. Each meal she brought to Lysara drew more of the poison to the surface. The dark veins receded inch by inch. Color returned to her cheeks. On the third day, Lysara opened her eyes. Theron. Her voice was a rasp, but it was there. Alive. Alawan had never seen a man move so fast. The Alpha King crossed the room in 3 strides and gathered his sister into his arms, holding her like she might shatter. Or disappear. "You're here," he breathed. "You're still here." Barely. Lysara's weak gaze found Elowen over his shoulder. "Who's she?" "The woman who saved your life." Lysara studied Elowen for a long moment, then smiled. A pale echo of what it probably usually was, but genuine. "Then I owe her everything." Later that night, Theron found Elowen in the kitchen, scrubbing pots long after everyone else had gone to bed. "Old habits die hard." "You don't have to do that," he said from the doorway. "I know." She didn't stop scrubbing. I don't know how to stop." He crossed the room and gently took the rag from her hands. "Then I'll teach you." Their eyes met, and that pull between them, the bond, hummed like a plucked string. "Theron?" She forced herself to ask the question that had been gnawing at her. "Who poisoned Lysara?" His expression darkened. "Someone with access to old magic and a reason to hurt me. Someone close enough to slip poison into her food without anyone noticing." He set down the rag. "Someone in my own court." The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. "You don't know who." "Not yet." His amber eyes burned. "But I will. And when I find them, they'll pray for death long before I grant it." The next few days blurred together in a rhythm Elowen hadn't known she craved. Mornings, she cooked for Lysara, watching the princess grow stronger with each meal. Afternoons, she explored the castle, the library with its towering shelves, the gardens where winter roses somehow bloomed, the training yard where she'd catch glimpses of Theron sparring with his men, moving with a lethal grace that made her mouth go dry. Evenings belonged to quieter moments, conversations over shared meals, stories exchanged beside the fire. Theron told her about his parents, their assassination when he was barely of age, the weight of a crown he'd never wanted but couldn't refuse. She told him about her mother, about the gift that had been her birthright and her curse, about the years of hiding and fear. He listened like her words mattered, like she mattered. It terrified her. On the 5th night, Elowen found him on the eastern battlements, staring out at the snow-dusted forest below. The moonlight caught the angles of his face, softening them, making him look younger and older all at once. "You should be sleeping," she said, joining him at the wall. "So should you." She shrugged. "Old habits." They stood in comfortable silence, the cold air sharp in their lungs. Finally, Theron spoke. "You saved her, Lysara. The healers are calling it a miracle." He turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his expression stole her breath. "I've spent 8 months preparing to bury my sister, learning to live with the grief before it even arrived, and you gave her back to me. In 3 days." "The poison isn't fully gone," Elowen cautioned. "I've pushed it back, but someone with old magic crafted it. I'll need more time to purge it completely." "You'll have it. Whatever you need. For as long as you need." He hesitated, and she watched him wrestle with words he didn't quite know how to say. "Elowen, I know this started as a transaction. I needed your gift. You needed freedom. But somewhere between that first night and now..." He trailed off, his hand rising to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers trembled slightly against her cheek. "I'm trying very hard to give you space," he continued, his voice rough, "to not let the bond push you into something you don't want. You've spent your whole life being used. The last thing I want is to be another cage. You're not. The words escaped before she could stop them. Theron, you're not. How can you be sure? We've known each other less than a week. Eowyn thought about Orvin's fists, about 17 years of cages, both physical and invisible, about the way Theron looked at her. Not like property, not like a tool, but like someone worth seeing. Because you gave me a choice, she said simply. Every step of the way, you gave me a choice. Do you know how rare that is? How precious? Something broke open in his expression, hope and fear and longing all tangled together. I'm not good at this, he admitted. Patience, restraint. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to claim you, protect you, and keep you. But I won't do that. I won't be that man. Eowyn rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question more than an answer. Theron went utterly still, and for one horrible moment she thought she'd made a mistake. Then his hands came up to cup her face, and he kissed her back with a gentleness that made her heart ache. Like she was something precious, something sacred, something he'd waited his entire life to find. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Eowyn pressed her forehead to his chest. Ask me to stay, she whispered. After the poison is gone, after you've caught whoever did this, ask me. And if I do? She looked up at him, pulse racing. I might say yes. The days that followed were stolen moments wrapped in tension. Theron kissed her in shadowed hallways, in empty stairwells, behind the kitchen door when Marin's back was turned. Each kiss grew bolder, hungrier, but he always pulled away before they went too far, leaving her breathless and aching and wanting more. You're torturing us both, Eowyn murmured one evening, her back pressed against the library shelves, his mouth a whisper from hers. I know. His voice was rough, strained. But I won't take you until this is over. Until you're truly safe. Until you can choose me without shadows hanging over us. And if I choose you now? His forehead dropped to hers, eyes closed, breathing ragged. Then I'll spend every day proving you made the right decision. But not like this. Not while whoever poisoned Lysara is still breathing. Not while they might use you against me. The words sent a chill through her warmth. You think they'd target me? I think they already know about you. He pulled back, and the fear in his amber eyes made her stomach clench. Word travels. A mysterious healer saves the princess from certain death. The king keeps her close. Treats her like she matters. His jaw tightened. If I were my enemy, I'd be very interested in who you are. Eowyn thought of Orvin, of the trafficking network, of the 17 gifted souls who'd vanished into locked wagons and never returned. The poison that struck Lysara, she said slowly, pieces clicking together. It's old magic, rare, the kind that requires gifted blood to craft. Theron's expression darkened. You think there's a connection? I think whoever poisoned your sister might be connected to the same people who were selling gifted individuals through Orvin's Inn. She met his gaze. And I think they're not going to stop just because you interrupted their supply chain. Silence stretched between them. After this is over, Theron said finally, his voice a vow. I'm going to burn that network to ash. Every buyer, every seller, every monster who thought they could trade lives like livestock. His hand came up to cup her cheek. And then, I'm going to ask you properly. Court you the way you deserve. Give you the choice you've earned. Promise? On my life. He kissed her once more, deep, desperate, full of everything they couldn't yet have, and then forced himself to walk away. Eowyn watched him go, breathless, her lips still tingling. She didn't know that in 3 days, she'd be fighting for her life. The attack came at dusk. Eowyn was in the kitchen, preparing Lysara's evening meal, when the door slammed open and 3 men in dark leather poured through. They moved like trained killers, silent, efficient, deadly. She barely had time to scream before a hand clamped over her mouth. Quiet, little cook. The voice was cultured, cold. We're just going to take a short walk. They dragged her through the servants' corridors, avoiding the main halls where guards patrolled. She fought, bit, kicked, clawed, but they were stronger, faster, and clearly prepared for resistance. They hauled her into a chamber she didn't recognize. Stone walls, no windows, a single torch casting flickering shadows. And standing in the center, hands clasped behind his back like he was receiving guests in a parlor, was Lord Carden. Elowyn knew him by reputation, Theron's chief advisor, a man who'd served the crown for 30 years, who'd helped the young king navigate the treacherous waters of court politics after his parents' assassination. Everyone said he was loyal to a fault. Everyone was wrong. So this is the miracle worker. Carden circled her slowly, his pale eyes cataloging her like merchandise. Prettier than I expected, though I suppose that explains why Theron's been so distracted. He'll kill you for this. He'll try. Carden smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. But by the time he realizes you're gone, you'll be 3 kingdoms away, sold to the highest bidder. Your gift is remarkable, you know. Healing through food. Purification. Truth revelation. There are collectors who'd pay a fortune for someone like you. The trafficking ring. Carden was behind all of it. You poisoned Lysara, Elowyn breathed, your own king's sister. A necessary step. Theron was getting too close to dismantling my network. I needed him distracted, grieving, focused inward instead of outward. Carden's expression hardened. It was working perfectly until you came along. 3 years of careful poisoning, undone in 3 days by a kitchen girl with a gift she doesn't even fully understand. 3 years. Lysara had been slowly dying for 3 years, and no one had known. Now I have a choice to make, Carden continued. Kill you here, and let Theron find the body. Devastating, but clean. Or sell you as originally planned and let him spend the rest of his life wondering what happened. He tilted his head. Which do you think would hurt him more? Before Elowyn could respond, the door exploded inward. Theron stood in the wreckage, and he was not the composed king she'd come to know. This was something older, wilder. The wolf barely contained beneath the man's skin, amber eyes blazing with lethal fury. Neither, he snarled. The fight was brutal and brief. Theron moved through Carden's guards like a scythe through wheat, his blade finding throats and hearts with terrible precision. Within seconds, all 3 lay dead at his feet. Carden had a knife to Elowyn's throat before she could run. One more step and she bleeds out, he warned, his cultured voice finally cracking. You can't save her, Theron. You never could. You couldn't save your parents. You couldn't save Lysara. And you won't save this one either. Theron stopped, every muscle rigid with restrained violence. Let her go, Carden. This is between us. It stopped being between us the moment she healed your sister. The knife pressed harder, and Elowyn felt blood trickle down her neck. Did you know I spent 3 years crafting that poison? 3 years watching Lysara wither while you searched desperately for a cure, and this girl undid all of it in days. Days. His voice rose to something unhinged. She has to die. They all have to die. Every gifted abomination who thinks they can... Elowyn slammed her elbow into his ribs. It wasn't elegant, wasn't trained, but it was enough to make him stumble, to create the fraction of space she needed to drop and roll. Theron's blade took Carden through the shoulder before the traitor could recover. The knife clattered to the floor. Carden followed, screaming, clutching his wound. Theron didn't kill him. He stood over the fallen lord, chest heaving, blade dripping crimson, and he didn't deliver the final blow. You'll stand trial, he said, his voice ice and iron. In the town square, in front of everyone you've hurt, everyone you've sold, everyone who trusted you. He knelt, bringing his face close to Carden's. And when they've heard every crime, when they've seen every piece of evidence, when the whole kingdom knows exactly what you are, then you'll hang. Slowly. Carden spat blood at his feet. You're weak. Your father would have killed me where I lay. My father trusted you. Theron stood. That was his mistake. I won't make it again. He turned to Elowin, and all that cold fury melted into raw, desperate relief. His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing the blood from her neck. Are you hurt? Tell me you're okay. Tell me. I'm okay. She covered his shaking hands with her own. I'm okay, Theron. You came. You found me. I'll always find you. His voice broke. Always. No matter where you are, no matter who takes you, I will tear the world apart to bring you back. She kissed him then, bloody and trembling and alive, and he held her like he'd never let go. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of investigation. With Carden imprisoned, his network began to unravel. Ledgers were found, correspondence seized, names of buyers and sellers extracted through interrogation, though Theron kept the worst of that work away from Elowin. She didn't ask. Some things she didn't need to see. What she did see was the steady stream of survivors brought to Thornhaven. Gifted individuals recovered from Carden's associates, half-starved and terrified, who'd been held in secret locations throughout the kingdom. 17 souls who'd been stolen and sold, plus a dozen more who'd never made it to market. Elowin cooked for all of them. Great pots of healing stew, baskets of truth-revealing bread, gallons of tea that eased trauma and soothed shattered nerves. She worked until her hands cramped and her eyes burned, and still she kept going. You're going to collapse, Marin chided, physically steering her toward a chair one midnight. The king will have my head if you work yourself to death. They need me. They need you healthy. There's a difference. Theron found her asleep at the kitchen table the next morning, her cheek pressed against the flour-dusted wood, and he carried her to bed without waking her. When she finally stirred, the sun was high and he was sitting in a chair by the window, watching her with an expression that made her heart stutter. How long did I sleep? 14 hours. He crossed to the bed, sitting on the edge. Marin threatened to resign if I let you near the kitchen today. I believe her exact words were, that girl has more heart than sense, and someone needs to protect her from herself. Elowin laughed weakly. She's not wrong. No. His hand found hers. She's not. They sat in comfortable silence. Finally, Theron spoke. The trial is tomorrow, in the town square of Millbrook, the village where the Ashen Hearth stands. I want the people who lived under Carden's shadow to see justice delivered. He paused. I want you there, if you're willing. Millbrook, the town where Orvin had operated, where she'd spent 17 years invisible and ignored. Why there? Because they should see you. See what you've become. See that the girl they overlooked is the one who brought down the monster in their midst. His amber eyes held hers. You don't have to. If it's too much, I'll go. He blinked. You're certain? Elowin thought about 17 years of silence, of bruises hidden beneath sleeves, of customers who saw her serve drinks and never once asked if she was okay. I'm certain, she said. I want them to see. Theron raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. Then tomorrow, he said quietly, the whole kingdom learns who you are. The town square of Millbrook had never seen a crowd like this. They came from every village within 50 miles. Farmers, merchants, mothers, children. Word had spread of Lord Carden's arrest, of the trafficking network, of the mysterious healer who'd saved the princess. And word had spread that the Alpha King himself would deliver judgment. Elowin stood at Theron's side on the raised platform, wearing a gown of deep forest green that Marin had insisted upon. You're not a kitchen girl today, the older woman had said firmly. Today, you're the woman who saved the kingdom. It felt like wearing someone else's skin. Carden was dragged before the crowd in chains. His fine clothes were gone, replaced by prisoners' rags. His cultured composure had cracked, leaving behind something small and spiteful. But it was Orvin who made Elowin's breath catch. He was hauled out beside Carden, chained to the same post. Their eyes met across the platform, and she saw recognition dawn, followed by hate. Thought you'd gotten away, didn't you? Orvin spat. Thought some king would save you. You're nothing, girl. Nothing but a freak who— Silence! Theron's voice cracked across the square like a whip, and Orvin's mouth snapped shut. The Alpha King stepped forward, and the crowd fell utterly still. For 30 years, Lord Carden served the crown. Theron began, his voice carrying to every corner. Trusted advisor, loyal servant, pillar of the court. And for at least a decade of that time, he ran a network that kidnapped gifted individuals and sold them like cattle. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. 29 people that we know of. Stolen from their homes, taken from their families, shipped to buyers across the continent who paid gold for living, breathing human beings. Theron's fists clenched at his sides. Some were children, some were elderly, some vanished on their way to market. Others were taken from their beds in the night. He turned to Carden. And when I got too close to discovering your network, you poisoned my sister. You crafted old magic to kill her slowly, savoring her suffering, planning to blame her death on illness while I grieved too deeply to see clearly. The crowd's murmur grew to an angry rumble. But you made a mistake. Theron extended his hand toward Elowen. You underestimated the people you thought were beneath you. Orvin kept this woman enslaved for 17 years, hiding her gift, using her labor, beating her when she didn't work fast enough. And yet she was the one who survived. The one who healed my sister. The one who gave me the thread I needed to unravel your entire rotten enterprise. He pulled Elowen forward and she stood before the crowd of people who'd ignored her existence for nearly 2 decades. Her name is Elowen, Theron said clearly, and she is the reason you're all standing here today. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a woman began to clap. Another joined, and another. Until the entire square erupted in applause that shook the buildings and echoed off the mountains. Elowen felt tears spill down her cheeks. Seen. Finally, truly seen. Theron raised his hand and the crowd quieted. The punishment for trafficking is death. The punishment for attempted regicide is death. The punishment for corruption of noble office is death. He drew his sword. Lord Carden, Orvin of the Ashen Hearth. You are sentenced to hang. The execution will be immediate. The gallows had been prepared in advance. Elowen watched as both men were led to the platform. Orvin screamed and begged. Carden maintained his silence, but she saw the fear in his pale eyes. When the trapdoors opened and the ropes went taut, the crowd didn't cheer. They stood in solemn witness, hundreds of people acknowledging the evil that had festered in their midst. The Alpha King had delivered justice, and the entire town fell silent. Afterward, Lysara found Elowen on the edge of the square, watching the crowd disperse. You're shaking, the princess said softly. I didn't expect it to feel like this. Elowen wrapped her arms around herself. I thought I'd be glad, relieved. Instead, I just feel empty, hollow, like I've been holding my breath for 17 years and now I don't remember how to exhale. Lysara took her hand. Then let me help. She led Elowen to a quiet corner of the square, away from the lingering crowd. And there, standing in the shadow of the old church, was a woman Elowen had never expected to see again. Her aunt, her mother's sister. The one who'd fled when Elowen was a child, too afraid to stay and face the same persecution. I saw the notices, the woman whispered, tears streaming down her weathered face. About the trial, about the gifted healer who saved the princess. She reached out with trembling hands. I didn't know if it was you. I prayed. I hoped. And then I saw you standing on that platform, and I knew. Elowen couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, could only fall into her aunt's arms and sob. For her mother, for her stolen childhood, for 17 years of believing she was utterly alone. You're not alone anymore, her aunt whispered. Never again. They returned to Thornhaven as spring broke over the mountains. Lysara grew stronger every day, the last traces of poison finally purged from her blood. She'd taken to following Elowen around the castle, learning to cook, learning to laugh again, learning to live without the shadow of death hanging over her. She adores you, Theron said one evening, watching his sister chase Elowyn through the gardens with a wooden spoon. I've never seen her this happy. She's easy to love. So are you. The words hung between them. Elowyn turned to find Theron watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. The network is dismantled, he said quietly. Carden's associates are imprisoned or dead. The buyers have been exposed, their assets seized, their victims freed. He stepped closer. It's over, Elowyn. The shadows are gone. Her breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying that I made you a promise, that when this was over, I'd ask you properly. Court you the way you deserve. He took her hands in his and she felt him trembling. But the truth is, I don't want to wait. I don't want to spend months circling each other when I already know. I've known since the moment you touched my hand in that filthy inn and the bond sparked between us. Theron, I love you. The words came out rough, raw. Not because of your gift, not because you saved my sister. Because you're brave and kind and you've survived things that would have broken anyone else. Because you make me want to be better. Because when I'm with you, I remember that being king isn't just about duty, it's about building something worth protecting. He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket. The ring was simple, a band of white gold with a single amber stone that matched his eyes. Marry me, he said. Be my queen. Stand beside me not because you have to, but because you choose to. Because despite everything this world has done to you, you're still choosing hope. Elowyn looked at the ring, looked at the man holding it. She thought about the girl she'd been, hidden, broken, invisible. About the woman she'd become. About the journey from that cold kitchen to this sun-drenched garden. Yes. The word was barely a whisper, but Theron heard it. His whole face transformed. Joy and relief and disbelief all tangled together. Yes. Yes. You impossible man. She laughed through sudden tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be your queen. Yes to everything. He slid the ring onto her finger and then he was kissing her, deep and fierce and full of promise. She kissed him back with everything she had, pouring years of loneliness into this one perfect moment. From across the garden, Lysara's whoop of excitement echoed off the castle walls. Finally! The princess shouted. I was starting to think I'd have to lock you two in a closet. Theron pulled back just enough to glare at his sister. You're ruining the moment. I'm enhancing it. Lysara bounded over, throwing her arms around both of them. I'm getting a sister. An actual sister. Do you know how long I've wanted one? Elowyn laughed, caught between the two siblings and felt something settle deep in her chest. Home. This was home. The bonding ceremony was held in Millbrook. It was Elowyn's idea, to return to the place where she'd spent 17 years suffering and claim it as the site of her greatest joy. The townspeople had built an arch of winter roses and spring blossoms. They'd lined the streets with candles. They'd come out in numbers that rivaled the trial, but this time their faces held only warmth. Elowyn walked toward Theron in a gown of cream and gold, her aunt weeping happily in the front row, Lysara serving as her attendant. The crowd parted for her like water, and everywhere she looked, she saw people who finally saw her back. Theron waited at the altar, and the love in his amber eyes nearly undid her completely. You're stunning, he breathed when she reached him. You're biased. Absolutely. Forever. The ceremony was brief, words of binding, exchange of vows, the sharing of ceremonial bread that Elowyn had baked herself, infused with promises and hope and healing. When they kissed, the crowd erupted, not in silence this time, but in joy, cheering, crying, celebrating the impossible love story that had grown from the darkest soil. That night, after the feast and the dancing and the endless toasts, Theron and Elowyn escaped to the quiet of their chambers. He loved her slowly, reverently, with a tenderness that made her weep. and she loved him back with a ferocity that surprised them both. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight. "Tell me something," Theron murmured. "Something I don't know." Elowin thought for a moment. "That first night, in the inn, when you said please, that's the moment I knew." "Knew what?" "That you were different. That you saw me as a person, not a tool. That maybe, just maybe, you were worth trusting." She traced the line of his jaw. One word. That's all it took. Theron's arms tightened around her. "I was terrified you'd refuse, that you'd see through my disguise and run. That I'd lose my only chance to save Lysara because I couldn't convince a kitchen girl to believe in a stranger." "Kitchen girl?" She smiled against his chest. "Is that what I am?" "No." He tilted her chin up, kissed her softly. "You're my queen, my mate, my home." Elowin thought about the girl who'd been scrubbing pots when a hooded stranger asked for one meal, who'd hidden her bruises and her gift, and her hope for so long she'd forgotten they existed. That girl wouldn't recognize her now, lying in a king's arms, wearing a queen's ring, finally free. "You asked for one meal," she whispered, "and I gave you everything." Theron kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Fair trade," he said. "I'd make it again. Every time. Forever." Outside, the celebration continued, music drifting up from the town square, laughter echoing through the night. But in their chamber, wrapped in each other, Elowin and Theron had already found their own forever. And it tasted like healing. Where are you listening from? Drop a comment below. I love hearing from you. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people discover these tales.